There.
Hi, welcome to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
Wow, Mark.
Who are you? Thank you.
And I'm Paul Ogden. I'm sorry I got distracted by breakfast. Mark is getting served breakfast as we speak.
This is September 1st, 2012. We are coming to you from the Road Dog Saloon in Indianapolis, Indiana, from Southeastern Avenue.
Road Dog Saloon. It looks like they have a fine breakfast here at Road Dog Saloon.
It appears to be, and I'll find out here in a moment, Paul. I apologize if this is a breach of manners for me to be eating while other people are watching there at home, but I'm hungry.
I understand, Mark. Show Civil Discourse Now, a show where we talk civilly about state, local, national, and international news.
And other things as well.
Other things as well. In the first segment, a lot of times we like to do what's going on. What's going on, Mark Small?
Well, what wasn't going on was Clint Eastwood trying to do improv comedy at the Republican National Convention.
And he was speaking to a chair.
He decided to do improv. At the last second, a movie star who's never done stand-up comedy decides to do an improv with a chair as a prop, and it just didn't come off.
And I saw a video where they were panning the audience, and they came to Mitt Romney and his wife, and Paul Ryan and his wife, and they were looking very uncomfortable about what was going on stage, because they like to, in these events, to know what people are going to say before they get up there. And as Mark said, he was doing impromptu.
And you should never...
improvisation, I didn't say that.
It's improvisation, but it's improv. You should never, in court, you should never call a witness if you don't know what they're going to say.
That is a very dangerous thing to do.
At a Republican National Convention or any party's national convention, you should never have a main speaker in the prime time hour for your whole party for that 4-year cycle say something you don't know when you don't know what he's going to say.
All right, and there another issue, Mark, relating to that was the Ron Paul.
Oh, I thought that was atrocious.
The Ron Paul delegation. There were a number of delegates who were there to represent Ron Paul. I think they believed they were going to.
And they were legally elected to represent him.
Right. And each state has very complex rules on how they select delegates. And they tweaked the rules so the Ron Paul people wouldn't have the power. And Ron Paul decided not to speak at the convention because it was going to be required that he make a full endorsement of Mitt Romney, and there were some other conditions as well. I can't remember what they were.
They've never really done that before in national conventions that I can recall. Predicate a candidate who's been qualified to speak by getting so many votes in the primaries, their ability to speak on giving an endorsement to the candidate who's going to be nominated by the convention. I mean, conventions before, there have been really drawn out battles over who's going to be the candidate.
Right.
And then at the end, I mean, you've still got people who are very bitter about the campaigns, and you wouldn't expect them to speak. But the whole idea is he had a right to speak, and they wouldn't let him.
Right, right. And Ron Paul, we should explain for the audience, is a individual who's run as a libertarian for president. He is from the more libertarian wing of the Republican Party, which isn't huge, but it is significant. And a lot of libertarian-leaning Republicans and a lot of libertarians, capital L, are unhappy about how he was treated.
And this breakfast is very good.
Good.
Another thing that happened this week, and this was locally, it also has to do with national politics, because nationally these things have gotten picked up all over the place. They're called tax increment finance districts, or TIFs. And in Indianapolis, politicians here discovered TIFs a few years ago, and they're using them to fund everything they can. And what a TIF does is, for a given area, let's say it's like an 8-block area, they decide that they're going to declare it a TIF district, and all the tax money from that district is only used for that TIF. It doesn't go to the general fund of the county.
Well, you should clarify, it is to develop a particular area.
Mm-hmm.
You have the baseline, what it was before, and then you have the increased property taxes captured in the TIF district, and that's supposed to be used to further more development.
Yeah, and the idea is by developing that area, you're going to get a bigger tax base for property tax. But a study this week, well, Pat Andrews, guest on the show last week, probably going to be a guest on the show in 2 weeks, obtained a newly released report from the Marion County Auditor's Office, and this is on Gary Welsh's blog, Advance Indiana, and he reports from her blog, which is Had Enough Indy, that the values in Indy's TIF districts dropped more than 30%. More than 30%. In other words, it's going the opposite of what the politicians said it was going to be. TIFs are a really cute concept, cute sounding idea, but it's a means by which politicians can paste over losses or deficits in budgets and act like they've suddenly made up those deficits. Richie Daley did it in Chicago for several years, left office, and the city was broke.
And part of the problem is they say there's a base, and the increase is what they're using. Increase from the development. They can borrow against that increase. The problem is if the base declines, you have to fill in the gap someplace.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They borrow against the base. So
Right.
it's like giving a teenage kid a credit card. Like 90% of the time, okay, 10% of the time that kid is going to be responsible. Probably a Latin Club high school president, or, president of the Latin Club in high school. I wouldn't have dealt with a credit card
You
responsibly.
ever go to Latin America, Mark?
I don't speak Latin anymore.
Okay, all right.
But the whole thing is, the city borrows against the notion that they're going to be making a future gain on the investment in the TIF. And so the taxpayers now are paying this money out. And when the TIF doesn't pull it off and doesn't profit the way it's supposed to, then the taxpayers are stuck. By then, the politicians usually are out of office. And these TIFs that are being developed now in Indianapolis it's like insiders and pals of the mayor are getting the benefits of the TIFs. And
In both parties. Both parties do. They grease the wheel of both parties.
Yeah, and that's what is one thing that we can say positively about Indianapolis. The corruption here is an equal opportunity matter. Nobody discriminates against Republican or Democrat. They're all becoming corrupt.
And one important thing to make about the TIFs is that ultimately it takes money away from the property taxes that pay for schools, for libraries, for public safety, for parks.
It's like this. A TIF is like if you were going to take part of your household budget, if you've got 4 people living in a house, and one person says, I'm going to take the money that I usually put in for rent, electricity, and utilities, and the cable, and I'm going to fix up the garage. So you let them do that. Well, you've lost 25% of the income of the household. They don't do anything with the garage, but they're still using the electricity and watching cable, and they bitch when the DVR doesn't work.
Yes.
To build the garage.
Yeah, and then
Right. And we have an audience here.
And we have an audience here today.
We're supposed to clap when we say that. All right.
So that's a big problem with TIFs. And then this week, the subcommittee on metropolitan economic development met.
And there was a TIF about the TIFs, Mark.
Yes, a TIF, TIFF, about the TIFs, TIFS. The chairman of the subcommittee had said that they weren't going to consider the TIFs because
The chairman being Steve Talley, who is in a district, I believe, north of here.
And they are trying to put reforms through on how TIFs are adopted. And so at the last minute, a bunch of people are wanting to put TIFs through that would square off little districts or big districts. Like one district covers 100 blocks to benefit 2 or 3 districts to be improved. He said they weren't going to put it on the agenda. He adjourned the meeting. He left the room. The subcommittee went ahead and voted the TIFs out of the subcommittee so they could send them on to City County Council so that they can get them passed before there are any reforms put in. When politicians want to pass things before reforms are made, I just don't like the feel of it.
And I think you really hit on it, Mark. They want to put reforms, and there's a group on the council that want to put reforms on the TIFs so that they're more transparent, so people know what the money's going for.
Yeah, because they're not told right now. Those details of what the money is going to be used for and what the development is and who the developers are, that's all secret. That's not being disclosed to anybody.
And what happened to get the TIFs through, what happened is the mayor went to certain councilors and said, well, if you vote for this, we will give you certain benefits, minority contracts, etc., training programs for your district. And it was a way of getting politicians to switch their vote.
And that's really not, that's not the way things are supposed to be done here. It's the way that it used to be done in Chicago, but Chicago has kind of changed since Daley got out of office. Third thing, we've got to talk about baseball.
Coffee's excellent, Mark.
The bacon and eggs, toast, potatoes here, excellent. This is we're at Road Dog
Saloon. Where are we at, Mark?
What's the address?
What's the address? Here we're on Southeastern Avenue.
Yeah, it's like 4861 Southeastern Avenue.
And we have a young lady who works here at the Road Dog.
Hi, I'm Dana Reno, and I work here.
Okay. And what is the address, Dana?
And I believe in the Libertarian Party.
Libertarian Party.
It's 4861 Southeastern Avenue.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Southeastern Avenue.
Appreciate that.
46203.
Okay, excellent. So, anyway, baseball. How are your Cubs doing, Mark?
No, the Cubs suck. Cubs.
You say that every year.
No, I don't. This year they just suck worse than other years. Baltimore Orioles might get in the American League, which would be interesting.
Are you talking about wild card, Mark?
Wild card, because
The wild card. We have a change in the wild card rules this year.
I noticed that there are 2 wild card teams that get
And
in.
do you favor that change, Mark?
No, I think they should go back to having 10 teams in each league and a World Series, but that's beside the point.
So Chicago would lose their team, and they had the White Sox. See. I'm sorry. I tend to. Mark gets very sensitive about this subject, the Cubs.
Paul, Clint Eastwood shouldn't have taken a go at stand-up comedy, and I don't think you should either.
I think you're right about that, Mark.
And your Reds are like 9 games in front.
Yes, they are. They're doing very, very well, even though their best player, Joey Votto, has been on the injured list.
So it looks like it's going to be the Reds, the Nationals.
Nationals are really good.
Yeah.
They've got the best record in baseball.
And then in National League West, Dodgers are fading. Giants are going to be in.
It looks like
Cubs suck.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a Cubs fan. The Cubs just suck.
Exactly.
Well, they had a chance to hire you for general manager. I don't know when they're going.
I put my app in. They didn't respond.
Application is.
Then we're looking at the American League. Yankees are kind of running away with that one. West, the A's are kind of edging with they're trying to put some pressure on the Rangers, and then who's third division? The other team on the south side is pushing away from Detroit a little.
White shoes. Or something.
We're going to be back for our next segment. Our special guests are Rupert Bonham and Brad Klopfenstein,
candidate for
governor and lieutenant governor of the Libertarian Party for the state of Indiana. We'll be back in just a minute.
Don't introduce facts.
This is the last frontier. Fact.
No. There are two frontiers.